Everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking with co-founder and CEO of Valory, David Minarsch. David, you have a pretty cool business, and I think a lot of people probably don't understand what it is. So we're going to dive into it. You create open source frameworks for co-owned AI, and you enable communities and organizations and countries to co-own AI systems. And so let's talk about that, right? So let's break it down to a kindergarten level to start. What does that mean?
Right. Always great talking to kindergarten level kids about AI, right? But we'll manage.
Well, I think
Most
it's so interesting. I was just somewhere, and I was talking to, there was a group of people, and I was so surprised that 3 people in the room had never used ChatGPT. Really, even weren't familiar with even other things like Claude or things of that nature. And we think everybody understands it, but then once they walk into it, it's hard almost to comprehend. So that's why I like to keep things simple as we start. So yeah, so talk to that group, and these were very astute business people.
Exactly. So let's start with ChatGPT and like kind of spin it from there. So ChatGPT is what I would call a talker, right? Like you can have a chat interface, you can send it what's called a prompt, like some text, and that can be a question, that can just be whatever, and then that talking machine will talk back to you, right? And the cool thing is that it will say something like sensible, like it will say something which makes sense in the context of what you're saying, and it has like a ginormous amount of knowledge about the world, so it will also contextualize it. And those listeners who and viewers who have like used ChatGPT will know about this. Now imagine that, but it's a doer. So not only does it talk back to you, but you can give it instructions, and then for longer periods of time, it will just do those things on behalf of you. That's what we could consider like an autonomous AI agent, and that's the kind of things which we are building at Valory.
Yeah, do things. And so give an example.
Yeah, so today these are very sort of specialized doers. So they are not as general as one day we would like them to be. So the kind of vision is you can kind of give it arbitrary instructions, and like an employee will go out and do it within its abilities. Today you can think of them as like very specialized sort of employees. They like there for one exact thing, and like you can kind of task them to do that. So we have agents, our biggest use case, that participate in prediction markets. So it's basically doers, like AI agent doers, predicting the future. And what they do in that context is they go, they find those so-called prediction markets, which are basically questions like, for instance, who might be the next president? And then they will maybe search the web, they use their own knowledge about the state of the world, and then they'll come up with a hypothesis of who will it be. And then they can put money where their sort of thinking is, and basically place a bet in these prediction markets. So that's a use case we currently have live with millions of transactions from autonomous AI agents.
Yeah. And so, it's so interesting. I want to talk about AI. You're talking about it, you're prompting it, it's going out, it's grabbing the web, et cetera. There's so much. I was talking to somebody who went to an AI conference, and one of the things that they were talking about that they shared with me is that right now the AI platforms have an IQ of about 155. Albert Einstein's estimated IQ was about 160, and Elon Musk is speculated to be about 155. And so we're kind of at that, what according to this person told me they heard, at like the 155. What they were talking about, and I don't know if this is fact or fiction, this is just what they shared with me of what they heard, was that next year AI platforms would have an IQ of 600, and then the year after that, 1200. So we're looking at, even if it's wrong by a little bit, significant growth from the AI world. And so as their IQ gets higher than any human could be, even though we only use 1% of our brain, what does your model look like in 3 years, in 2 years?
Yeah, that's a great question, because effectively, if we are continuing on the train on which we're now, right, then basically like there's these large labs. None of them are actually profitable. They're all working towards a future where there will be. And the idea is that, one day they'll basically take a tax on all economic activity, like loosely put, right? Like any sort of level of intelligence you want to have access to, you'll call into these centralized models. They'll give you an answer or even an agent, and then you can sort of participate, quote unquote. Now, the issue is obviously that's not particularly appealing for both end users and businesses at a certain point, right? It's kind of all fun and games if you have these kind of useful models and some parts of like our business workflows are augmented, or we can occasionally use them. It's all cool. But imagine like entire like slivers of the global GDP run on these kind of models and agent architectures, and that's, I think, where we're headed. And that's also what the people you alluded to, I believe, are thinking and saying. Then it would be quite useful if, as businesses, as users, as like organizations, we can own these agents and models outright. So this means they have to be open source, but we also want to be able to run them, like not relying on some third party necessarily.
Yeah, let's talk about two things. As you're talking, it makes me think of two things. One, we've been using AI for a long time. We just haven't realized it. I remember reading a book 30 years ago, 25 years ago, by Seth Godin called Permission Marketing. And it was talking about how in the very, near future, it's going to say, well, if you like this, you may also like this. If you like this, 10 other people like this, et cetera. It's really was a great book. And so there's that piece. And then there's also kind of the AI hallucinations where they do get things wrong, where I think it does take some human observation to make sure that we're not looking at what they call a hallucination. And so how do we make sure that what we're getting, we know is really precise?
Yeah, partially that's a question of like, the research and making these models better and like kind of avoiding issues around hallucination and capturing them and so on. It's also, though, much more problematic than just that. So let's imagine even like we solve these problems. Now we need to think about people's incentives. So let's say I'm like a provider of a very powerful model, and you come to me with like one of those prompts, i.e. what I put into the chatbot, like the chat interface. Well, you can serve me the response which the model is giving, right? But you could also inject like some sort of advertising auction and actually serve me what some highest bidder wanted me to hear, right? And we know this is exactly what's happening with search. Like if you think about like Google search, it's exactly what's happening. Like it's kind of okay, we kind of get these labels as ads to a degree, but in chat it can be much more complex. And I think there is a real like issue when you're like not just on the kind of technological level of kind of avoiding these hallucinations and making these models better, but also on the economic level of making sure that, okay, we have these like intelligence in like these kind of models, right? And like, do I actually get access to that intelligence, or is it altered in some way? Am I hearing this because of your political opinion or because someone paid for me to hear it, right? Some advertiser.
Right. There's still a lot of, I think, kinks to work through with that. I'd like your opinion on a couple of things. What skill sets do people need to grow today that may make parts of their job obsolete because of AI? I think there's a responsibility that we all have to take and say, okay, this is in front of us. This is doubling on a very fast pace and keeps on compounding. And so from your perspective, what do human beings need to work on? What skill sets to make them a little bit more inelastic in the continuum of job employment?
Yeah, I think the first step is to expose yourself to that technology. Like we started at the beginning, a lot of people aren't actually exposed, don't understand it, or have like these very like kind of far removed like sort of third degree experiences of it. And then once you've exposed yourself, there's ways these tools can augment your like particularly the chat GPT and the likes can augment your workflows today. And I think that's like something where you can have like real productivity gains. Software engineers see that, right? People like in content creation see that. And then there's a question of like, okay, what are these maybe not so good at? Like, where are the uniquely like human capabilities, right? And some of them are maybe around creativity. Like there's a debate around like how actually like creative these models can be versus how like they're just sort of big averaging exercises where they're sort of very good at generalizing distributions, as the statistical term would be, around like what the underlying sort of world models look like, and then sort of they kind of give you like, you know, in terms of images, you could imagine like the sort of all the in-betweens between the two images you could be painting. But it's a question like, can they maybe create something entirely new? Like that question isn't quite clear
Yeah.
yet. And the other thing is like talkers in isolation can't like actually go that far. Like we know this from like you know, lots of areas of life. You need experimentation, and so like you need doers, and that's also why we find autonomous AI agents so interesting, is because you not just have like models which you can sort of query about information and like kind of give these prompts, but you can then have these sort of act on some world and like the real world, some sort of aspect thereof, and kind of create these loops where they kind of sort of explore that. And I think that's very interesting.
And so if you're a college professor today, if you're teaching grad school, law school, medical school, how are you incorporating AI? What are you teaching today? And how to use it, how to incorporate it? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think I would always like at Valory, we have this sort of set of company values, like how we work. And one of them is like embrace like the AI tools as much as possible. So if you can like replace something you'd be doing yourself with AI, then often like that's the right thing to do. I think
Yeah,
there's like when you write essays or being creative, it's important to still like occasionally do this yourself, because otherwise you don't like kind of explore that part of your persona and like what you could like create there. But yeah, I would say lean into it. And then the question is like how like real is that relationship, and like how much control do you have over that relationship with these tools, right? If these tools are sort of very far removed from you, if they're like owned by decentralized corporation, and every time you're engaging with these tools, actually you're dealing with a new model because they've updated it for whatever reason, or you know, you one day might not want to send your private data there, then all these questions come to bear, which we like tackle with every day, which is around like how can the user own as much of this experience as possible? How can groups of users own their models, their agents, and what kind of application can that enable around like, you know, their private data, but also just like the specific economic edge they have and that they want to exploit together with their agent, rather
yeah,
than sort of give it all away to OpenAI or someone else like that.
yeah, yeah. You know, as you're talking, it reminds me of articles that I've been reading over the last decade, talking about the importance of schools and colleges and individuals and companies to really focus on how their adaptability, and that's one of the, you know, their and how they're adapting and forecasting. And I agree with you. Looking at the tools, it'll be so interesting in 10 years, 20 years, the generations that are in elementary school right now, being raised on AI, what they'll be able to do, the ideas that they're going to come up with, no differently than the generation that was raised with cell phones versus, you know, some of us that didn't have until we were much older. It's interesting how it's going to shape and shift the landscape, you know, over the next decade or two.
Yeah, and
When
I
you
mean we're in this massive change, right? Like
Yeah,
you'll have what's like humanoids, you'll have like these software agents, and like it's really, I think, important for people to also like think about what kind of world do we want to create. Like, is it one where like some small set of megacorps provide these services and all the data flows back to them, or is it a world where I can have like these sort of digital or robot companions, but they are like in a relationship like whatever nature it is with me, and like they don't like leak that information I share with them to the centralized place where it gets exploited against me. Like that's very important, and that affects all of society.
yeah, there needs to, with great, you know, God, I can't think of the name, you know, the uncle in Spider-Man, Voltaire
Yeah,
actually said it, you know, with
yeah.
great, my brain's escaping, I should Google it while I text.
Power is great
With great power
responsibility.
comes great
So
responsibility.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that is kind of the, you know, it's the ring in Lord of the Rings. It is what will you do when you have all the power? And I'm sure that we'll see a lot of standards and rules around it. I know companies already are and customizing it for themselves. What are
But
on that?
just on the ring as well, like they destroy the ring, right? So ultimately the answer isn't like, let's safeguard the ring, because that doesn't work out. They actually end up destroying it. So we shouldn't actually create that like sort of centralized mega model which some smart people control. It's a route to disaster, if you take that analogy.
Yeah, we have to be responsible and careful with it. So So let me ask you a question. So talk a little bit about what your company does for other companies, and who basically would be an ideal client, somebody who's looking for fill in the blank.
Awesome. Yeah. So Valory builds open source software, and basically we do that with this mission to ultimately give you an autonomous AI agent that you can fully own. And so the way we tackle that is, rather than sort of building a centralized labs where we build like cool software and then sell it to you at a fee, we give everything away for free. Like there's an open source stack, an open source protocol. They're called Olas, olas.network. You can look it up. And we use crypto incentives to basically coordinate like a marketplace of developers, of people who launch use cases, we call them launchers, and of the actual end users who use those agents. And that's what this Olas protocol does, to which Valory is like a core contributor.
Great. And how should people connect with you?
I'm on X, for instance, so David_NM. There's also the Olas protocol has an account at Autonolas. And yeah, if you're interested in exploring like user-owned AI and like user-owned agents, come talk to us. We're working with a lot of very renowned like crypto and non-crypto projects on use cases. And as I said, millions of agent transactions from our agents live, hundreds of daily active agents. That's really an ecosystem worth exploring.
Great. I love it. All right, quick speed round. A book that's had a great impact on you.
Lord of the Rings.
Best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
Oh my goodness. I think live life, like you go out, touch grass, this sort of thing.
Yeah. Nature is important for sure. Last question, finish this sentence. One thing everybody can do to increase their level of knowledge on a daily basis with AI is?
Yeah, I think use the tools, as we said, and then sort of start getting involved, which can be like, be creative about it with art, educate people, write books, have podcasts, or become a technologist, or like figure out how you can apply it in business, right? If you're like introducing these workflows into your business, like ask the question, do you want to be long-term like siphoning off a tax to like some centralized labs, or do you want to like build it on an open source stack?
Yeah, I love it. David, I appreciate this talk. I appreciate you calling in from India. It's great to talk to people all over the world. As a business coach who works with people who are successful but stuck, I love this podcast because I get to have guests like you on to shed insights to get them unstuck. The community, I always like to extract at least one thing, and that is that David talked about, just maybe start replacing one small thing and using AI a little bit more. ChatGPT is great. You can create your own personal ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT every day. I almost think of it as a person as part of my team. I brainstorm with it. Those things that are on the tip of your tongue that you just can't access, it will help you get to that, bring out ideas, evolve ideas. I think it's been great for my business and I love it. But if David can help you on a larger scale, please reach out to him, valory.xyz. And if I can help you with any business coaching, don't hesitate to reach out to me at jondwoskin.com. David, this was great. I enjoyed this talk. You'll have to come back and we'll talk more about AI. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.